All right, it's time for some playoff predictions. Part one. Now, if you watch all of the prediction videos that I do, you can probably figure out some of these teams that I have predicted to go to the playoffs. But as much as I wish everybody watched every video, I know that's not the case. So I'm going to briefly, and I do mean briefly. I know the other day at the beginning of a video I said, I'm going to try to keep this one short, like around 10 or 15 minutes. And it ended up being 30 minutes long like normal. I promise you this one will be around the 10-minute mark. I'm going to briefly go through the predictions that I've already done so far. I'm not going to pull them up or anything like that. I'm just going to hit the highlights, tell you the record I have them, and whether or not I'm predicting them to go to the playoffs for 2025. So if you look over here on the side of the screen, I've got the playlist pulled up from over on YouTube of all the prediction videos I've done so far. So I started out with Clemson, then I did Tennessee, Nebraska, Arizona State, Florida State, Alabama, Southern Cal, Colorado, Penn State, South Carolina, Oklahoma, and most recently, Miami. So we'll just start at the top and work the way down. I did the Miami prediction video a few days ago, and I've got Miami at 10-2. They went 10-2 last year. I actually predicted them to go 10-2 last year, and they did go 10-2, but they missed the playoffs. If you'll remember, they were considered almost a lock for the playoffs heading into the back half of the season, and they had a couple of unexplainable losses to Georgia Tech and then Syracuse the last week of the regular season. That knocked them out of the ACC championship game, put SMU and Clemson in, and both SMU and Clemson ended up making the playoffs while Miami was right on the outside looking in at 10-2. So I've got them at 10-2 again with a key difference from last year. I've only got Miami losing one conference game this year. I've got them dropping the Notre Dame game early in the year. That's a non-conference loss. And then I've got them losing one of back-to-back road games that they have to close out the regular season. They have two road games back-to-back, Pitt and Virginia Tech, I believe it is, and I've got them losing on the road at Virginia Tech. They've got a couple of other difficult games. Obviously, they could lose more than two games, but my official prediction for Miami, 10-2, and only one conference loss, which means they will almost certainly be headed to the ACC championship game in 2025 if this prediction comes true. What I'm not certain of is if they were to lose that conference championship game and end up with the three losses. Now, Clemson got into the playoffs last year with three losses out of the ACC, but they won the ACC championship game. SMU got in with two losses. They only had one loss in the regular season, and then they lost the ACC championship game. So they got in with two losses out of the ACC, one loss occurring in the ACC championship game. Clemson got in with three losses, but they won, so they automatically got in. I'm not convinced a 10-2 Miami who loses the ACC championship game would get in. So right now, when it comes to Miami making the playoffs, I'm like 80-20, 80 that they will, 20 that they won't, because there's a good chance they could lose the ACC championship game and still get in, or maybe they lose it and don't, but if my prediction comes anywhere close to being accurate, they will be in the ACC championship game with a chance to go to the playoffs. Oklahoma, not headed to the playoffs in 2025. I do think they will be better this year. Obvious upgrade, in my opinion, at the quarterback situation. It was a disaster last year with Jackson Arnold. He was in and out, benched, then back in. Wide receivers were injured. They had issues along the offensive line. It was just a forgettable year altogether for Oklahoma. They're too talented, I think, to be that bad record-wise again, especially considering I find it almost impossible to believe that they're going to have quarterback play anywhere close to as bad as they had last year. I think John Mateer and the offensive coordinator that comes with him, an obvious upgrade over what they had last year. I think Oklahoma wins 7 or 8 games, which would be an improvement over last year. 8-4, I think, is very possible for Oklahoma, but I do not think they will be making the playoffs in 2025. South Carolina is another interesting one, similar to Miami. They were sort of on the bubble at the end of last year. They finished 9-3 in the regular season, a couple of heartbreaking losses on the road at Alabama and at home to LSU, ended up doing them in, keeping them out. They've got sort of hopes of potentially trying to make the playoffs in 2025. They have a fairly tough schedule and one of the toughest sort of months in November, sort of middle section of the schedule that you'll see. In 4 consecutive weeks, they play on the road at LSU, home against Alabama, home against Oklahoma, and on the road at Ole Miss 4 weeks in a row. I think that 4-week stretch in the middle of the season will determine whether or not South Carolina is a playoff contender at the end of the year with 10 or possibly more wins, or if they lose too many of those games in that 4-week period, they could play themselves out. I've got South Carolina finishing 9-3, same record as last year. It's possible a 9-3 regular season SEC team could get into the playoffs. It nearly happened last year with South Carolina, with Alabama, and with Ole Miss finishing right on the bubble. It's going to depend how many 2-loss and 3-loss teams there are across the other Power 4 conferences and how those teams sort of match up with the 3-loss SEC teams. Who did they beat? Who did they lose to? You know, if you got losses to Vanderbilt and a bad Oklahoma team, you're probably not getting in. We saw that with Bama last year. So we'll see. I have a feeling South Carolina probably misses the playoffs in 2025. To be honest with you, my 9-3 prediction for South Carolina is pretty optimistic. When you just look at the schedule, it looks like 4 or 5 losses. I'm sort of giving South Carolina a lot of benefit of the doubt that historically maybe they haven't earned. But Shane Beamer has exceeded expectations at South Carolina in 3 of the 4 years that he's been there. If they do that again in 2025, they will be close and maybe get into the playoffs in 2025, but I'm not picking them to make it as a part of my official predictions. Penn State below that. I do have Penn State headed to the playoffs. I'm a buyer on Penn State. I'm a buyer on James Franklin. I'm a buyer on Drew Aller. If I'm wrong, y'all can troll me into oblivion all season long and all next off season, but I'm all in on Penn State. In fact, I think they might be the best team in the country. Them or Clemson, I think, are absolutely loaded. Returning quarterbacks. Penn State, 2 of the best running backs in the country. A great offensive line. They're going to be stout on defense again. I know they lost their defensive coordinator. They somehow lost a top 5 defensive coordinator in Tom Allen and replaced him with a better defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles. Their defense will be fine. They brought in a couple of key additions through the portal at wide receiver, and they really need those wide receivers to be a hit. If they are, I think Penn State could contend for and possibly win the Big Ten, and I do think Penn State will make the playoffs. I've got them at 11-1. I've got them beating Oregon in the first half of the season at home, and of course losing on the road to Ohio State later in the season. I can't pick them to beat Ohio State right now until I see them do it, but I do think Penn State is a legitimately good team. I think they're a legitimate national title contender. I've got them at 11-1. I'm predicting them to make the playoffs again. Colorado, no. Big step back for Colorado in 2025. I think they lose too much and they don't recruit well enough. And yeah, look, they're one of the worst running teams on the planet each of the last 2 seasons. Their offense was keeping them afloat through a passing game with Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, a couple of those other wide receivers, and they're all gone. They lose 3/4 of their secondary. They lose their quarterback. They lose their best playmaker in Travis Hunter. They just lost too much. Are they going to win 3 or 4 games? Probably not. I've got them at about 7 wins. They probably go 7-5. Potential maybe for 8-4 if Juju Lewis or Caden Salter, the transfer that they brought in. Julian Lewis is the freshman, Caden Salter, the transfer. If one of those 2 QBs can sort of play at a very high level, maybe they can beat. See, the Big 12 is so hard to predict. There's a lot of teams sort of jumbled together there. I feel like Colorado is kind of on the outside looking up at kind of the top 5 or 6 teams in the Big 12, which is why it feels like probably about a 7-5 season. But they overachieved last year, and if they do it again, maybe they get to about 8 wins, but I've got them at 7-5 and not making the playoffs. Southern Cal also not making the playoffs. I won't be picking Southern Cal to make the playoffs until Lincoln Riley shows me a competent defense. I've been waiting 9 years. I've yet to see it. I know he hasn't been at Southern Cal for 9 years, but you go back to his time at Oklahoma, same thing every year. Heisman caliber QBs, an amazing offense, and a defense that can't stop a nosebleed. Not a good year last year, their first year in the Big Ten. It feels like a need-to-win year for Lincoln Riley. Now, his contract is huge, and the buyout would be through the roof, and I don't know if Southern Cal is in the mood to be firing head coaches right now when you just now entered a period where you got to start paying the players $20 million a year. But it's no secret around here on this channel, I'm not a fan of Lincoln Riley. You can't field half a team, offense only, and expect great things. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Southern Cal will be a decent team. I think they'll have a decent offense because Lincoln Riley normally does. I just don't buy the defense until proven wrong. I think Southern Cal could get to 7 or 8 wins, potentially even 9-3 with an upset or 2, but I do not think they're competing for the Big Ten. I don't think they're on the same level as an Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, or even a Michigan, honestly. And they might be even a step below sort of the backdoor contenders in the Big Ten, like your Illinois and your Indianas. But they feel like about a 7 or 8 win team to me, Southern Cal, not making the playoffs in 2025. Alabama, disappointing first season last year with Kalen DeBoer. Losses to a bad Vanderbilt team and a bad Oklahoma team kept them out of the playoffs at 9-3. They then got embarrassed and humiliated themselves in a bowl game against one of the worst Michigan teams this century. Jalen Milroe's gone. Ty Simpson is in. I think they're going to sort of more of a traditional Kalen DeBoer offense. I actually think it's addition by subtraction here. Ty Simpson might not be the athlete and have sort of the wow factor moments that maybe Jalen Milroe had, but I think he'll be able to run Kalen DeBoer's offense at a high level. I think Alabama will get back to the ground game. I think they're going to have one of the best defenses, not just in the SEC, but in the country. I do not think Alabama will be losing 2 years in a row to Vanderbilt. They do have a tough schedule. They got to play on the road at Georgia. They host Tennessee. They host LSU. They play Auburn at the end of the year. They play Florida State and Wisconsin in the non-con schedule. I'm a buyer on Alabama. I've got them at 11-1. I'm going to be honest. It feels more like 10-2 when you look at the schedule and sort of some of the new pieces that are there. But when I did the schedule, it broke down at 11-1. Their only loss on the road at Georgia. LSU game will be tough, but it's at home, and they beat LSU by 40 last year. They do have to play on the road at South Carolina. They could lose that one. I've got them beating Georgia, not losing to Georgia. I've got their only loss on the road to South Carolina. I can't believe I just said they were losing to Georgia. Of course, Bama's not losing to Georgia. They never lose to Georgia. I've got them beating Georgia on the road early in the year, losing on the road to South Carolina a little bit later on. But I think Alabama goes 11-1. Competes for the SEC championship and makes the playoffs in 2025. Florida State's a big fat no for me. Now, they might be one of the most improved teams in the country in terms of overall record, right? They could triple, maybe even quadruple their win total and still not come anywhere near the ACC championship game of the playoffs. 2-10 last year, just a horrific year for Florida State and Mike Norvell. Completely turned the roster over through the transfer portal. Another new quarterback, Castellanos from Boston College, who has diarrhea of the mouth and can't shut up with the interviews about how they're beating Alabama, which of course they're not. But I could see a scenario where Florida State gets to 7 or 8 wins. I think anything short of a bowl, and Mike Norvell has 100% got to be fired. I'd fire him if he wins 7 games. But again, having to pay the players $20 million a year now is going to slow some of these schools down in terms of being quick to fire head coaches. And Florida State's retarded and gave Mike Norvell one of these 10-year, $100 million contracts right after he lost by 60 to Georgia in the Orange Bowl. So they're kind of hamstrung financially. They got, they filed all those lawsuits, spent all that money on lawyers' fees. You already know they're poor. They've told you they're poor. We don't make enough money in the ACC. We need more of that. So they've told you that. So they may keep him. I don't know. He's not a good coach. He's had 3 losing seasons in 5 years. Could be his 4th in 6 years this year. But I've got him making a bowl game, most likely going 7-5 or 8-4, but not making the playoffs. Arizona State, I think, makes a return trip to the playoffs. Now, this is confidence meter very low here. Not because I don't think Arizona State is good. I do think they're good. Are they great? Probably not. They're probably good to really good. But there's 4 or 5 teams in the Big 12 that I think are good to really good. Arizona State, Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech. There's 5 or 6 teams or maybe 7 teams that I think have a legitimate shot of winning the Big 12. And whoever wins the Big 12 is headed to the playoffs, right? Last year it was Arizona State, even though they were picked this time last year to finish dead last in the Big 12. But they returned 10 of 11 starters on defense, a defense that was number 1 in the Big 12 against the run last year. Quarterback Sam Levitt is back. They've got a wide receiver who's going to be drafted in the 1st or 2nd round. They do lose Scatteraboo at running back, sort of the heartbeat and soul of that team. And I do think that will hurt them in certain situations, critical moments of big games, maybe where you sort of had him to rely on. Now you don't. You got to find another go-to guy. But if I got to roll the dice on a team in the Big 12 out of those 6 or 7 teams that I think could potentially win it, why not go with the team that made it last year? I'm going to go with Arizona State. I've got them at 11-1, a return trip to the Big 12 title game, and most likely a return trip to the playoffs. Nebraska, no. I think they could win 7 or 8 games. I think they'll make a bowl game for the 2nd year in a row, which is unbelievable when you consider they went a decade without making a bowl game until last season. But I do think Matt Roll will guide them to the postseason for the 2nd year in a row. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska has an upset win or 2. I also wouldn't be surprised if they lose a game maybe you don't expect them to lose. They're in sort of that middle ground right now. They're not a terrible team. They're good enough to beat some good teams, but I don't think they can play good enough consistently enough to sort of win 9 or 10 plus games to have a chance to get into the playoffs or compete to win the Big Ten. But I could see them winning 8 games maybe, which would be an obvious improvement over where they were before they brought Matt Rule in. Still probably not where Nebraska fans want to be, though. I don't think they make the playoffs in 2025. Tennessee made the playoffs last year, not making the playoffs this year. The quarterback situation is a mess. We'll see. I don't think they're going to bring in the BYU. Bringing in the BYU to Tennessee sounds good in that their only options right now are G5 Joey, who's an interception machine in the group of 5 and has never played Power 4 football, and 2 underclassmen at Tennessee who have never started a game. So you look at the BYU and you go, well, he's experienced and he won 11 games last year. Yeah. You're going to bring him in after July 4th when you've got basically 5 weeks till the start of the season to learn the Josh Heupel offense? Now, I know the Josh Heupel offense only has 5 plays, but Tennessee fans have been telling me for years that, no, I'm wrong. That's not the case. It's a complicated offense, woo. Well, if it's a complicated offense, he can't learn it in 5 weeks. So I don't know if they're going to bring him in or not. Even if they do, even before they lost Nico back at the end of spring practice, I didn't consider Tennessee a playoff team in 2025. Now, I also don't think Tennessee is sort of falling back to where they were, you know, the first year under Heupel or even back further with Jeremy Pruitt and Butch Jones, where a bad year for them equals 4 or 5 wins, 6 wins. I don't think that either. I think they could definitely win 8 games, maybe go 8-4. 7-5, I think would be a little disappointing. 9-3, I think would be pretty good. And there's a potential they could go 9-3. They have to play on the road at Alabama and on the road at Florida. And it's hard to have confidence in a Josh Heupel team winning big road games because they struggle to win bad road games. They're just not good on the road. They get Georgia at home. Not an easy schedule, not the most difficult schedule in the world either. We'll see. They host Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is better than last year, but it's in Neyland. We'll see. But Tennessee seems like a 7-8 or 9 or win, a 7-8-9 win team. I guess I'll split the difference, 8-4. But I don't think they're making the playoffs. And then way back in the beginning of June, I did the Clemson prediction video, and I've got them making the playoff. I think Clemson's really good. I think they're going to beat LSU in the beginning of the year. I think they're going to lose to South Carolina at the end of the year, but I think they win every other game. I think Clemson goes 11-1, makes the ACC championship game, and most likely wins it. I think Clemson's capable of beating all of the other contenders within the ACC. Actually, I think I've got Clemson at 10-2, losing to Louisville. They played Louisville on the road Friday night, midway through the season, and they lost to Louisville at home last year. And Louisville's a good team. Brahms a good coach. He's got a good quarterback there. They're a dangerous team. So I've got Clemson at 10-2, beating LSU to start the season at home, losing on the road at Louisville in the middle of the season on a Friday night, and losing to South Carolina at the end of the season, which is a non-con game. So 1 ACC loss, same as Miami, so you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. I've got Clemson and Miami playing in the ACC championship game. I think Clemson would beat Miami. I think they're a better team than Miami. And that gets me back to my earlier point about Miami. If Miami goes 10-2, I've got them at 10-2, but then loses the ACC championship game, so they're 10-3 with a loss in the ACC championship game. Clemson would be, 11-2 with a win in the ACC championship game. So obviously Clemson would be in an automatic bid by winning the ACC. What would the committee do with a 10-3 Miami? Probably would get in. It would depend, of course, what else was going on in the rest of college football, but going to be hard to leave out, I think, a Miami whose 3rd loss comes in a conference championship game. We'll see. But I do have Clemson definitely making the playoffs. I've got Miami most likely making the playoffs. So here's the recap. Clemson making the playoffs. Tennessee, no. Nebraska, no. Arizona State, yes. Florida State, no. Alabama, yes. Southern Cal, no. Colorado, no. Penn State, yes. South Carolina, no. Probably a game short again. Oklahoma, no. Miami, probably yes. 75% to 80% yes on Miami. That's where I'm at right now. I've done, I don't know how many that is, 15 prediction videos or so. So this is Uncle Lou's Playoff Predictions Part 1. I'll make another month's worth of prediction videos throughout the month of July. And then at the end of July, I'll come back on and I'll do another playoff prediction, sort of a playoff predictions part 2. So how many of the 12 do we have right now? Let's assume Miami gets in. That's Miami, Penn State, Bama, Arizona State, and Clemson. So that 5. I've got 5 teams in so far. We still got to do a Notre Dame prediction. They're likely to get in. That would be 6. I haven't done a Notre Dame prediction video yet, so I can't put them on the playoff list right now yet, but I have a feeling they're getting in again. If that's the case, that's 6 teams. That's half the teams down. That's 6 of the 12 right there. So end of July, we'll do another one of these videos, sort of a part 2. And I'll tell you the other 6 teams that are making the playoffs. Lustradamus with your 2025 playoff prediction part 1. Those 5 teams are making the playoffs. Type about it down below and have a good morning.